Okay, so we are right at time. I'd like to welcome everyone here for David Fernandez, My Brother's Keeper, a qualitative, hold on, sorry. Can everyone hear me? I'm sorry. My Brother's Keeper, a qualitative student of peer mentors in Veterans Treatment Court. Welcome, David. It is great to have you here. And over the past couple of months, I've been excited to work with you as your chair and to see exactly the outcome of this doctoral project. So please give us more information, introduce yourself, and you have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. I am going to share my screen here. Let me see. There we go. So you should all be seeing the screen now. Do you see that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Perfect. So again, good morning. Today we're a little bit about peer mentors with the court. So let me draw your attention to a scenario. John served his country for 10 years. During that time, he was deployed to Afghanistan, twice experiencing combat. He was tough, resilient, and accountable. He was unwavering in the face of warfare, and he led men and women into battle. His troops depended on him to guide them through the fog of war. Now, once he returned home, he was honorably discharged and has been regarded well by his committee for his service. But like many fellow veterans, John suffers from the wounds of war alone. He is irritable and short with people, unusually aggressive, and has found it difficult to hold down a job now that he is a civilian. He frequently experiences nightmares that wake him up in the middle of the night and make it difficult for him to sleep and get a decent night's rest. His mind plays games and images of combat replay like small movie reels that he can't control and that are triggered by routine daily moments like a loud bang, a scream, or even a car horn. Now, to try to calm his mind and to stop these images, he turns to controlled substances and alcohol. However, John is unaware that he is participating in a destructive cycle that can lead to addiction. Now, at work, John was caught with some of these illegal substances, and now he faces a judge who sits up atop a bench and that is elevated, and it's meant to be imposing. It's meant to reinforce the idea that the law is supreme and that those that come before the law have fallen well short of society's expectations. Now, John feels judged. He feels ashamed, embarrassed, and he no longer feels like the military leader who was proud, upright, and sharp. He no longer feels like the man he once was. Now, in this courtroom, John is a defendant. He is shackled at the wrists, surrounded by police officers. He's in an unfamiliar environment, and he feels criminal. When the court addresses him, he stares down the floor, he talks softly, and he doesn't really engage with court personnel. John's experience is not uncommon. He is now a justice-involved veteran. The road before him will be daunting. However, since 2008, there has been a court program that is designed to help veterans just like John. And that is the Veterans Treatment Court, and it is the subject and the focus of my research. Again, good morning. This presentation is on veteran treatment courts and the volunteers who help justice-involved veterans within those courts. They're called peer mentors. Generally, peer mentors are veterans who volunteer to help justice-involved veterans navigate the Veteran Treatment Court program. The research I conducted was a qualitative research study focusing specifically on the state of Florida. Now, by way of background, a little bit about my introduction. My name is Dave Fernandez, and I am a doctoral student at the University of Arizona. My work focuses on criminology and justice studies, particularly within the veteran community, which stems from my background in the military and in criminal justice. Specifically, I'm an 8-year Navy veteran. I worked as a Master at Arms, which is like a police officer in the Navy. I have experience conducting criminal investigations through the military and through NCIS. I was responsible for educating and training the new police force assigned overseas to the bases that I was attached to. After completing my military service, I obtained a couple of doctorate degrees or advanced degrees. One was a master's from the University of Oklahoma in human relations. Another was a Juris Doctorate from Stetson College of Law. In my legal practice, I worked in both civil and criminal jurisprudence, including experience working with the prosecutor's office and the FBI. However, it was an opportunity working with veterans in the criminal justice system that led me to this endeavor and ultimately to this study. So let's focus on veteran treatment courts. What are they? Well, veteran treatment courts were modeled after Judge Russell's court back in 2008. Judge Russell was a drug treatment court in Buffalo, and what ended up happening is that he ended up having veterans in his courtroom. And one particular veteran, Judge Russell found that that veteran wasn't able to communicate with the court. So the judge sent the justice-involved veteran outside and had that veteran talk to one of the judge's assistants who was also a veteran. Now, before that occurred, the veteran was not speaking with the court, head down, dropped shoulders, not engaging, not allowing the court to help that veteran through the process. But after speaking with a fellow veteran, the justice-involved veteran returned and now was engaging. Judge Russell discovered that nobody knows a veteran like another veteran. And if he could create a court specific to the needs of veterans, he could get more out of the justice-involved veteran program, or justice-involved veteran. So today, veteran treatment courts are one of the fastest growing courts in America. There are over 600 veteran treatment courts throughout the United States, and it's still growing. So what makes a veteran treatment court unique? Well, justice-involved veterans are a unique population. Their needs have to be met through unique methods. And what do I mean by that? Well, the veteran treatment court is a problem-solving court. It's not designed to punish the individual. It's designed to understand the underlying issues that cause criminality and address those issues. When it comes to veterans, that could essentially be something along the lines of what drug courts do, which is attaching the person to services to lead to sobriety. They're similar to mental health courts. Veteran treatment courts attach justice-involved veterans with VA services so that the individual can get the treatment that they need to address issues like post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury or other issues that come because of military service. And lastly, veteran treatment courts adopt military customs within the court itself to build some kind of familiarity for the individual that's going through the process. Now, what's the goal of veteran treatment court? Well, the goal is for a veteran to receive graduation and ultimately obtain a dismissal of their charges. But it's not just about the dismissing of the charges. There's other things that happen as well. Some veteran treatment courts allow for record expungement. Others, the goal is to connect that individual with VA services that will continue providing services to the justice-involved veteran even after the court program is complete. Sobriety, reestablishment of productivity in the community for that justice-involved veteran, and finally, rebuilding of the social identity of the justice-involved veteran back with an identity of being a contributing member, a veteran, somebody that is looked on positively in society versus those associated with being a criminal defendant. Now, incarceration among just involved veterans is still very high. 31% of veterans experience incarceration during their lifetime. About 8% of the total prison population is a veteran. Actually, that population is actually even higher when you account for those on parole or probation or other judicial restrictions. And many veterans suffer from, substance use disorders, uncontrolled aggressions, and other mental infirmities. It's interesting because the veteran incarcerated population in the United States is actually greater than the in total prison population of 208 countries in the world. Now, what do we know about justice involved veterans and the risk factors? Well, we know that there's links between substance abuse, mental illness, and criminality. We also know that unaddressed service-connected injuries contribute to veteran criminality. But this begs the question: if veterans suffer from these infirmities, why don't they just seek help? Well, there's this thing called the warrior culture, or the warrior mentality. Also, the warrior mentality or warrior culture is an attribute of military service. It's promoted by military culture and it presents itself even after military service. For example, toughness and self-reliance, which are essential for military members, results in negative views about mental health treatment and the negative aspects that could happen, like stigmatization, in going out and getting mental health treatment. So what ends up happening is that about 50% of service members don't actually receive treatment for their mental health infirmities. Now, this is where veteran treatment courts can step in, because veteran treatment courts utilize peer mentors. And again, the idea of utilizing peer mentors within veteran treatment courts is that no one knows the veteran better than another veteran. Now, what do peer mentors do? Well, the answer is not exactly established and it can differ based on jurisdictions. But for the most part, they promote teamwork, they alleviate stresses of court, rebuild social identity for the justice involved veteran, they promote adherence to legal authority, they can communicate more effectively between the veteran and the court, they help meet the social services appointment for that justice involved veteran by making sure that they go to the VA appointments that the court is scheduled for them. They could be a necessary outlet. They can talk with the justice involved veteran in a way that justice involved veteran could never speak to an attorney or a court. They share a unique bond with the justice involved veteran. So they can be like a de facto liaison, a coach, a friend, a tutor, or even a guide to the justice involved veteran. However, there are some problems. And one of those problems is that there is a complete void of academic research on the importance of peer mentors, their specific roles in the veteran treatment court, how they're trained, or even how they're perceived by justice involved veterans themselves. Now, it's that research that led me to this study. What we found is in the academic research is that, again, no guidance on how peer mentors are supposed to act. There's no standard application for peer mentors within the court. I found that there's a need for systematic examinations, including the process and outcomes, in hopes of providing more credibility and acceptance of utilizing peer mentors. And the interrelationship between mentorship and program outcomes is lacking in the research. So what I've essentially found is that there's no guide or any particular theory on how peer mentors are supposed to act within the veteran treatment court. Now, this creates a frustrating endeavor because Judge Russell, when he created the veteran treatment court, he suggested that volunteer peer mentors were a critical component of the veteran treatment court model. However, research shows that only about 30% of veteran treatment courts utilize peer mentors. And in 10% of the courts that actually utilize them, the program is underdeveloped, which means that as many as 40% of the 600 veteran treatment courts in existence today either don't have or underutilize peer mentors within the court. And that's supposed to be a critical component. So I found that there was a problem in the making. a lack of research, no standardization, roles that are undefined, a lack of use, beg the question, will peer mentors become obsolete? Well, that's where the research started. Peer mentors are a critical component of the Veteran Treatment Court, but their use is not standardized or even adopted by some courts. And the question is, are peer mentors really a critical component of the court today? So why is this particular study important? Well, Veteran Treatment Courts are the fastest growing problem-solving court in America. Again, 31% of the veteran community reports having experienced incarceration. Between 25 to 40% of justice-involved veterans have mental health issues. And many veterans turn to self-medication instead of asking or seeking help as a way of coping with the negative impacts of their mental health infirmities. And it's interesting, about 25% of justice-involved veterans were actually under the influence at the time of committing their criminal act. So to address this issue, it was necessary to reduce the problem to something that was manageable so that I could create a study. And how do we discover if peer mentors are still a necessary component of the Veteran Treatment Court? Well, I determined that you start with a single jurisdiction. And that jurisdiction was Florida. Now, why Florida? Well, here's why. Florida has the third highest veteran population in the country. It has over 20 judicial circuits and 32 veteran treatment courts within those 20 circuits. Treatments in Florida are codified. In other words, they exist because of a statute, and that statute is Florida Statute 394.47891. However, the statute itself doesn't allow or doesn't mention the use of peer mentors. Instead, what it does, it gives a lot of leeway to the judges to determine how best to establish a protocol. So my research was guided by essentially two accepted theories in criminology. One of those is the general strain theory, and the other is the procedural justice theory. The general strain theory posits that criminal behavior is a coping mechanism for some individuals, which can attribute it to the strain or stressors they're experiencing. Some of those strains can include homelessness, post-traumatic stress disorder, unemployment, familial disputes, mental health infirmities. Essentially, what ends up happening is because of strain, sometimes a justice-involved veteran will turn to criminal activity as a way to overcome that strain. Specifically from our research, another thing that was discovered is that the manner in which a court interacts with a justice-involved veteran, that can cause strain, which can potentially lead to future criminal activity. So here we look at the procedural justice theory to determine if there's something we can do. And under that theory, what it determines is that how a court treats a criminal defendant is capable of reducing strain and can lead to reduction in recidivism for that justice-involved veteran. Essentially, fair and impartial treatment by the courts leads to a justice-involved veteran trusting court personnel and believing in the legitimacy of the Veteran Treatment Court program. So, from adopting the procedural justice theory through the Veteran Treatment Court, courts have the ability to reduce the potential for strain and therefore reduce the possibility of future criminal conduct. How best can we reduce strain in the courtroom program? Well, the answer we believe is you use peer mentors to help reduce that strain. So the overarching research question of my study was, do judges presiding over a veteran treatment court in Florida perceive peer mentors as a necessary component of the court program? Well, what did we do? We conducted we established an interpretive, phenomenological, qualitative design study. We did this through two parts. Number one was a semi-structured interview. which are the most common method of interpretive phenomenological studies. But we also use surveys. And now this type of design was sought so that we can capture the lived experience of a phenomenon. And that phenomenon was the use of peer mentors within the veteran treatment court in Florida. And through a purposeless sampling of individuals who had experienced that phenomenon, we tried to capture what it was like to work with these peer mentors. Now, to establish credibility, validity, and reliability, we utilize triangulation, and we did this by comparing data collected from the semi-structured interviews, their survey questions, and we matched them up and asked questions in different manners so that we could compare answers and try to find consistencies in the answer and identify any contradictions. So who were the participants in our study? Well, in Florida, they're judges who preside over veteran treatment courts, and because they're the ones that get to establish the use of peer mentors, we determined that judges were in the best position to participate in our study. So there were 32 potential judges. However, only 4 judges participated in the survey, and 2 judges participated in the semi-structured interview. However, because saturation can be reached between 5 to 10 interviews or surveys, we felt that with 6, we had enough to move forward with our study. And here are the results. We've essentially found 5 overlying themes. As you can see here, the numbers 14, 9, 6, and 3, that's the years of experience of the participating judges and how they each one answered each one of those themes. You can see here that for the most part, 3 out of 4 answered similarly, and there was always one outlier. Here's what we discovered interpreting the data. Peer mentors are a necessary component of the veteran treatment courts in about 75% of our respondents. In most instances, the presiding judges had a positive experience with peer mentors. Most judges found that peer mentors helped justice-involved veterans keep their appointments and adhere to the court program. However, some judges had doubts about the qualifications necessary for peer mentors. And about half of the respondents were either unaware or unconvinced that the training provided to peer mentors was adequate to meet the needs of the court. So after conducting a study, there were additional findings that we discovered. First, there's no standard training program for peer mentors in the state of Florida. There appears to be a generation gap between the actual peer mentors and the justice-involved veteran. For example, justice-involved veterans tend to be a little younger, while the peer mentors tend to be of an older generation, like the Vietnam era. There was a limitations for courts on how to recruit peer mentors. They're a lot of times limited by location. The judges themselves were not involved in the training for peer mentors, so they had very little feedback on how to improve training for peer mentors. And what we also found is that the qualifications for peer mentors could differ vastly based on what jurisdiction they were working on. So we created some recommendations on our research. One of them is to actually establish a standardized training program for peer mentors. A second was to recruit younger peer mentors throughout the state of Florida by making them aware that this is a need in court. Also, we want to reach out to legislators in Florida so they can codify peer mentors within the statute so that gives more leeway to the judges to create a program that can meet more of the specific needs of justice-involved veterans. And of course, we want to conduct future research utilizing peer mentor coordinators. One of the things that we discovered in our research is that peer mentor coordinators possibly have more knowledge or feedback on dealing with peer mentors because they are more involved in the recruiting, the discussions, the day-to-day interactions with peer mentors in the court. So I'm excited about the study and it being a first step in what we can do in the future. And I'm also very much looking forward to doing some of these things moving forward so that we can help build that future academic credibility for peer mentors within veteran treatment courts. After that, now I'll open up the floor to any questions.
Thank you so much, David. That was very thorough exploration of the current need for more peer mentors, especially those that might be of the same age as the justice-involved veterans. I do have a question. How easy do you think that it would be for you to present this to legislators to get it into the Florida statutes?
Uh, in Florida, it would probably in Florida it's probably easier to go to your local legislator and try to provide them the information to get in front of a larger crowd. Let's say in Tallahassee, it would take a little bit more coordination. Because you'll have to, Florida legislators only meet once a year for a few months, and they do a lot during that meeting, but they're not there all the time. Usually, they're back in their offices. So the way to do so in Florida would be to reach out locally, try to get the ear of your local legislator, and then try to set up some kind of presentation after the fact to hopefully be able to go back up to Tallahassee. So to answer your question, to try to get your foot indoors, probably a little easy. To try to be able to present on a wider to a wider audience, probably a little bit more cumbersome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Let me monitor the chat. The veteran courts here in Fort Campbell, Kentucky are outstanding. The veteran population in the area is huge. The 101st Airborne Division, 5th Special Forces Group, and the 160 Special Operations Aviation Regiment, all of whom say heavy combat in Iraq, so a heavy combat in Iraq and Afghanistan are all based here.
Yeah, and this is interesting because the research from Dr. Dowd has shown that not just in Florida, but nationwide, veteran treatment courts don't have a standard application of peer mentors. So, for example, what you may end up finding in your jurisdictions like this, like in Kentucky, a lot of the peer mentors are going to default to their military training on how to deal with other justice-involved veterans. Now, that's great as far as the intent. Problem is, there's not a lot of academic support that the military training necessarily leads to effective peer mentorship in the veteran treatment court. So this is why it is necessary and critical that a standardized program, as best as we can standardize it, is created and applied throughout the court so that these mentors have a better understanding of how they should handle justice-involved veterans. Because otherwise, they're just going to default to what they feel is best based on their own experiences. And that may not always translate best to meet the specific needs of the justice-involved veteran.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? So it says in the chat, completely agree. One of the most effective guys here was severely wounded and is now an LCSW working with the courts. So you bring up an important point because there are human service as well as social workers and therapists that can step in to provide that support. What do you think about that, David?
Oh, working with them is great. I think what Judge Russell envisioned when he created the Veteran Treatment Court is that there's going to be a special bond between those that have actually served, particularly, and when I say those that served, there's a bit of a difference even in the military between those who served and those who served in combat. Okay, the experiences of those who served in combat is vastly different than those who served. So what I think Judge Russell was envisioning is that when a justice-involved veteran comes to court and they're dealing with an atmosphere that they're completely, unfamiliar with, they're going to be more likely to open up to somebody who's got similar shared experiences with. So while social worker understands how best to get the person to open up, how best to work with that individual, how to potentially allow that individual to, getting connected with the services that they need. The problem is that the veteran may not feel comfortable opening up to them because they're going to feel that this individual doesn't understand them. And I'm not saying that's correct, but that just may be the way they feel. And that's why Judge Russell said, no, we need peer mentors who are veterans, because that is going to open up that door, because there is going to be that common shared bond where the veterans can say, okay, you understand where I'm coming from. And now they open up and we can get them connected to the services that they need.
Travis agrees with you. He says you're 100% correct. So if we have no further questions, that will conclude our presentation. I wanted to add, Travis also said during the height of the war, don't talk to me about the war if you aren't wearing a combat patch. I fully understand that.
In the Navy, we don't always have combat patches. The pilots do. A lot of us have the coins.
Well, thank you so much for such an informative presentation on justice-involved veterans. And you've done great work. It's been a pleasure to work with you. And I am grateful to be your chair.
Great. Thanks so much. Love the opportunity.
Take good care.
Bye.